Good evening. I'm still reporting on the coup. Mark Levin went on Fox this morning and blasted the far left for their constant, illegal, unconstitutional attacks on President Trump.
If indicted, Trump would be the first president in U.S. history to ever face criminal charges, as he remains under intense legal scrutiny over additional probes still underway.
Joining us now, the legend, the host of Life, Liberty, and Levin, Mark Levin. Mark, what's your take on this?
Let me read something to you. Frederick Bastiat, The Law, and many people know who he is. Ronald Reagan had his book prominently displayed. The law perverted, and the police powers of the state perverted along with it. The law, I say, not only turned from its proper purpose, but made to follow an entire contrary purpose. The law become the weapon of every kind of greed. Instead of checking crime, the law itself guilty of the evils it is supposed to punish. And let me tell you something. When the people lose faith in the law, the country's done.
That's exactly
right.
And
the people are losing faith in the law because the Democrat Party, Democrat prosecutors in Manhattan, a Soros prosecutor, wants them to lose faith in the law. Their whole goal is to destroy the civil society and the morality that undergirds it. That is the mission of the Democrat Party. How many times have they gone after this man, Donald Trump? What exactly has he done to deserve this? Why are they studying his life like they're studying an archaeological site? Why are they looking for novel legal theories to go after the man? Why are they trying to turn a law upside down, which is what they're trying to do, where they have to jump through the hoops in Manhattan? The statute of limitations, 2 years for a misdemeanor, 5 years for a felony. They've been examining it for 6 years. The Southern District of New York, the U.S. Attorney's Office looked at it and said there's no federal crime here, and there isn't. And how do we know that? Because this was tried against John Edwards, and that case was lost.
Yeah.
And it was lost under the tutelage of a man you may have heard of, Jack Smith, who's the special counsel now in Washington, D.C., when he headed the public integrity section of the criminal division. This guy's invisible hand is everywhere. So now you have this hack prosecutor in Manhattan. Let me put this in plain English so everybody can understand what's going on here. It's not hush money. These are non-disclosure agreements. Companies, individuals, divorced parties entered into non-disclosure agreements, 10,000 a day probably all across this country. How much you want to bet the Manhattan DA's office has entered into non-disclosure agreements? How much you want to bet the Department of Justice, the FBI, and the U.S. attorneys have entered into non-disclosure agreements? How much you want to bet these news operations covering it, like MSNBC, NBC, and the rest, have entered into non-disclosure agreement? Now we call it, hush money. There's nothing illegal with non-disclosure agreements. The reason you have a non-disclosure agreement, whether it's severance or something, is you're telling people, keep your big mouth shut. And in exchange for that, we'll take care of you. That's not a crime. It is what it is. It's a contract. That's number one. Number two, what is this DA doing? So he has a non-disclosure agreement, does the Trump organization or this entity set up by Michael Cohen. So what? So why do they keep looking at it? Well, because it was paid for by a third entity that used corporate money. So what? Who cares? He didn't pay for it out of his campaign, Donald Trump. So there's no question of the misuse of campaign dollars. Here's what they're saying. They're saying, okay, misdemeanor statute of limitations is run. State felony statute has run. We can't make a felony case anyway because it's not a felony. We have to have an underlying obstruction. So we'll look at federal law, which is not even the jurisdiction of a local DA. And federal law says what? Federal law says you can't expend money, campaign law, for the purpose of influencing an election of this sort this way. But what else does it say? However, if that money is used and it has other purposes as well, that is, it's not just a campaign, somebody's embarrassed or somebody doesn't want to get information out, or whatever it is, then it's not a crime. So this thing isn't a crime from process, from substance, in state law, in federal law. What's happening here is they're using the law the way they use the Constitution to try and destroy the law and destroy the Constitution. What would you expect from a radical left-wing legal bomb thrower who's inserted into this position by George Soros?
Exactly.
Notice they're all Democrat investigators. and they're all Democrat jurisdictions. New York City, Atlanta, Washington, D.C. I mean, this is outrageous. And let's move on, because I hear some people say, no, wait a minute. This case is an abomination, but the others are powerful. Let me deal with the others very quickly. Let's look at this document case. You're taking a document case and you're trying to make an obstruction case? Obstruction against Donald Trump. How? Well, we asked for the documents over and over again and he wouldn't give them to us. That's an obstruction case against a former president? I was a former chief of staff to a former attorney general, Ed Meese. If I'd gone, or a U.S. attorney had gone to Ed Meese and say, look, we want to charge Jimmy Carter because we keep asking him for the documents. He's got classified. He won't give them to us. We're going to get a warrant. We're going to, you know what he'd tell me? Get my ass out of his office. What, am I out of my mind? But not these guys, because it's a righteous pursuit for the left. It's a righteous pursuit to go after parents, to go after pro-lifers. It's a righteous pursuit to go after Republican state legislatures, Republican members of Congress. And I'm telling you something here. They are setting a precedent that is disastrous. Did Donald Trump obstruct when it came to documents at Mar-a-Lago? He has a funny way of obstructing, doesn't he? He didn't put them in the fireplace. He didn't shred them. He didn't rip them up. That would be obstruction. He didn't sell them to the enemy. He didn't do any of that. They're in Mar-a-Lago under the protection of the Secret Service. Wow, what an obstruction case. Now let's take the more complicated one, January 6th. They're trying to twist the law again, laws that haven't been used since the Civil War against the Confederacy, to try and use them against Donald Trump. And you had Saul Weissman here and others say, yeah, there we got really serious things. Let me explain to you. You know what this is? This is the book that governs us. This is the Constitution of the United States, not the criminal code, not unelected prosecutors, not the Department of Justice. Why is the Department of Justice involved in the 2020 election at all? Why is it subpoenaing state legislatures? Why is it deposing Donald Trump's lawyers? Why is it doing all these things? And I say this because the party that has the say on whether they're going to accept electors is Congress. Congress. There were no U.S. attorneys when this document was written. There wasn't an attorney general when this document was written. There wasn't a Department of Justice when this document was written. There wasn't a criminal code when this document was written. It's a political act electing a president. There are state legislatures involved. There are electors chosen. There have been disputes before. They haven't been settled by U.S. attorneys in the Department of Justice. They're settled by the United States Congress. So let's say, just for argument's sake, let's stipulate, and I'll be attacked for this, but I'm the one who actually reads this. Sorry, I'm not a former federal prosecutor, which is irrelevant when it comes to the Constitution. But I did work at the Justice Department. Let's say the president called some legislatures in state X and said, you might want to consider reversing this or doing that and something like that. Why do you think the Democrat lawyers are in the state legislatures? They were there to change the laws, to change the regulations, to do what? To change the outcome. Well, is the president of the United States the only one who can't talk to legislators? Who can't talk about the processes they have used to select electors? And particularly when these changes are made basically at the 11th hour by state courts who do not have the authority under Article 2, by federal courts who do not have the authority under Article 2. This isn't a theory. This is something that came up in the Bush versus Gore litigation in 2000. And I guess a conspiracy theorist, no less than the former Chief Justice William Rehnquist, even raised it. Who has a final say here? As the Florida Supreme Court kept changing the law, the Florida legislature was about to meet an emergency session to tell the Florida legislature to go stick it. We have the final say under the Constitution. All of a sudden, that's a theory. So we have a jerk in Manhattan who has a novel legal theory. It's not a novel legal theory. He's lawless. And then we have black and white text in the Constitution that says the state legislature makes the final decision, and that they call a legal theory. And our whole history says Congress has the final decision on who chooses electors. So if a president picks up a phone and says, hey, Ernie, you might want to consider, and I don't know all the facts, but if he says, Ernie, you might want to consider this rather than that, and so forth, the That's obstructing the transfer of power. There's been no transfer of power. The election isn't over because NBC, ABC, and CBS says it's over on election night, or 2 weeks after election night, or a month after election night. The election is over when Congress is done meeting in joint session and counting electors. And nobody knows this better than Jamie Raskin, the leftists, and other Democrats who tried to change the outcome of an election in 2016 and tried to change the outcome of the election when George Bush got elected by challenging electors. So what the hell is a U.S. attorney doing, or a guy that used to prosecute at The Hague doing, who's another Democrat and whose family's filled with Democrats? What are they doing trying to criminalize this sort of thing? So I take a different view. I take the constitutional view, not the accepted view from all these former federal prosecutors, that this is bogus. Every damn one of these cases is bogus, just like the Mueller case was bogus, just like the phone call to Ukraine was perfectly fine, 2 bogus impeachments. This is outrageous. One last thing, although it's not the last thing, but one other thing I want to say. Donald Trump today is the leading candidate for the Republican nomination for president. Can you believe a local DA knows that he doesn't have the law, state or federal, on his side, and is trying to cripple the nomination for the presidency? Can you believe a federal prosecutor appointed by Biden's attorney general is trying to bring bogus charges against the president with 1 grand jury is not enough, 2 grand juries in order to prevent Joe Biden from running against that opponent? Can you believe a DA in Atlanta is trying or thinking about bringing charges when the Constitution, the federal Constitution, not talking about the rest of it, the federal Constitution says Congress chooses in the end the President of the United States? I tell you, Bastiat was right. The law has become an ass, as some people have said, and so the people who are pushing this are asses too, as far as I'm concerned.
Mark, can I ask you really quick?
That's it.
Mark, what does this mean for the people? Because I've spoken to a lot of people who have lived under totalitarian states, and they will say that the beginning of this looked a lot like this. Political prosecution. We saw January 6th. We see, what's happening with Donald Trump. Anyone associated with him has had to face, jail time and all kinds of bogus charges. So a lot of people I talk to say, I'm worried. They're conservatives. They say, yeah, this is about Donald Trump, but I'm worried about me. And how do I live in this country that now has a 2-tier justice system?
Well, you should be. If you protest in front of an abortion clinic now, you're putting your freedom at risk. Yeah. If you protest at a school board meeting, you're putting your freedom at risk. If you go to a protest and it turns ugly, some people riot and you don't, and people pick you out of a picture and you're going to be charged, you're putting your freedom at risk. If you go online and try and put information, or did under Twitter and so forth, the FBI, the Department of Homeland Security, the intelligence agencies, you're putting your personal, confidential lifestyle at risk. So you can see the First Amendment's under attack, the Fourth and Fifth Amendments are under attack, the 10th Amendment's always under attack, separation of powers is under attack. The Democrats attack the Constitution. They reject the Declaration of Independence. They want to stuff the court with like-minded ideologues. They want to add 4 Democrats to the U.S. Senate. They want to change the voting system so they never lose. They build a 2 million person bureaucracy, so even when they lose elections, they continue to legislate from this behemoth Leviathan. So, yes, I wouldn't say people say that this is what happens in tyrannies. This is a soft tyranny.
Yes, it's a soft tyranny. Yeah, because if you can't protest freely, then are you a slave or are you a citizen? Are they in charge? Are you in charge? Because I thought we were supposed to be in charge.
I'm still reporting from just outside the citadel of world freedom. Good day.